I gripped the hard, unforgiving steel in my hand as if my life depended on it. The pistol grip felt comfortable, even inviting, as if it had been made especially for me. My finger hovered over the trigger, twitching dangerously. One click. That was all that was required. One small push, and I could end my life. Exactly. An overwhelming feeling of divine power washed over me. Killing someone shouldn't be that easy, but it's simple. Tears streamed down my face and my heart sank. It twisted in unnatural directions, twisting into an unrecognizable shape. It was difficult for me to think clearly. All I could do was feel pain, rage, powerless hopelessness. They were like omnipresent creatures lurking inside me, almost alive. "Kill her!" Rage whispered in my ear, in a demonic voice dripping with evil. Pain, on the contrary, screamed loudly in agony. Hopelessness just wanted to give up on life completely. All three of them were forced to witness that terrible show, at which I sat in the front row. "Just pull the trigger," my dark passengers chanted. "Make us feel better." My rational brain tried to turn on. The good, decent person inside of me was trying to bring me back. He told me that after I did this, nothing would be the same. There will be no return to what was before. My fate will be decided. I will officially become a murderer. What is he talking about? Everything has already changed. She took care of that when she chose him over me. It was her choice that brought the three of us here. It's her fault. She made it. Now shut up and let me give her what she deserves. The terrible day she told me that our life together was over was a week ago. With a voice full of regret and a lump in her throat, she told me that she had to leave. She should be with him, her love. I wish I could say I took the news like a man. I wish I could say that I invited this bitch to kick rocks on her way out of my life forever and finally slammed the door behind her traitorous ass. But I didn't do any of this. Instead, I lost all my dignity. Every last ounce. I threw it at her feet, begging her not to leave. I fucking begged. I sat and cried like a widow at a funeral, begging her to love me more than she loved him. We've been through so much. We had plans for the future. We were going to take our baby and move into that big house that she liked. This was her dream home. She imagined herself in a house like this when she was a child. And yet these plans were not enough for her to decide to stay with me. Our love wasn't strong enough to keep her from getting into his bed again and again behind my back. Of course, she wasn't enough to let him go. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I love you. I really do. But I can't leave him. I must follow my heart," she cried, hugging me, begging me to understand. I felt the moisture on her cheeks as she pressed her face to mine. With each sob, her ragged breath danced on my neck. What was it that she wanted me to understand? Did she really expect me to make it easy for her? Was I supposed to just give her my blessing so she could find happiness without me? Is she completely crazy? I gave her everything, all. I would have given more if she had asked. But this was something I would never give her. I will never give her my blessing to be with another man. How can any man agree to this? How can he just sit idly by while the woman he loves sleeps with another man? I will kill her. She must die. I took aim. I can finish her off at any moment, and she won't even know what hit her. Her shoulder blades moved rhythmically, while her shadow danced on the wall of the candlelit room. Her small, manicured hands were pressed firmly against his chest to give her the leverage she needed. Even the softness of her silhouette was beautiful. How could such a beautiful and erotic scene be so disgusting? My mind teased me with memories of running my hands along the curve of her spine. I could practically feel her soft skin on my lips, running kisses from her shoulder blade down. The ghost of her eyes looking at me with lust as we made love was real enough to make my lips curl into a smile. A quiet groan pierced the air, breaking me out of my reverie. They moved smoothly together, each of them working on their partner. They gave their bodies completely to this moment. They were like passengers on a blissful ride. I remembered those days when she and I were also in sync. Damn, that was just a week ago. I was furious. They were so into each other that they didn't even realize I was in the room. They did not hear me enter the house, climb the stairs, and open the door with a creak. Now they stood in the face of imminent death and knew nothing. They are lost in their sea of nirvana. How could she be with him? How could she stop loving me so easily? No matter what she said, she couldn't love me and do this to me at the same time. No person who loves someone would break their heart so easily. Did she ever love me? My heart began to beat faster, with both anger and anticipation. I mentally prepared myself for the sudden shot that would ring out after I pulled the trigger. I weakly tried to calm my nerves and stop the trembling in my hands. Shooting at paper targets at a shooting range is one thing, but like this, tears burned in their eyes as everything blurred before them. It became more and more difficult to keep the gun ready with each passing moment. I wanted them dead so badly. But I couldn't control my inner voice. My demonic passengers tried to silence him, but he was there, begging to be heard. It is not right. He was right. This was wrong. But standing there watching them make harmonious love was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. It was as if they were dancing to their own music. At that moment, I realized how well he knew her. He knew her body, every centimeter. He was with her more often than I wanted to think. She was a liar. Damn liar. She told me that her body was only meant for me. I was the only one who had the good fortune to enjoy her feminine forms. She said she belongs to me, but this idiot enjoyed the thought of making love to the woman who belonged to him. I felt my finger tighten on the trigger. I blinked to clear away the moisture. I saw my goal clearly again. Die, bitch. Just before I released hell and torment, I saw our son. He was not physically in the room, but rather a flash of memory in my head. I saw his face, similar to mine, his smile, his hair. Bobby Jr. was an exact copy of me. My finger relaxed as his eyes looked into my soul. How could I do this to him? This act of revenge will not end with the cheater dying in the arms of her lover. This will only be the beginning for Bobby. My retribution will be at his expense. Crap, I wasn't the most attentive father. I wasn't here for him, like a father should. I was practically a stranger to him. And yet, I loved him. In my own way, I loved him. Did I love him enough to let his mother burn my heart with impunity? Did I love him enough to leave everything behind for his sake? Yes, I loved it. At this thought, the gun began to lower. It was no longer aimed at her back. I died a little more inside, letting my opportunity for justice slip away. I needed it. I really needed this. But he needed her more than I needed retribution. Having made my decision, I began to slowly back away from the room. I silently and easily took each step, retreating. In the background, the two fools continued to make love, completely oblivious to how close they were to their end. I'm almost out, almost freed from the clutches of revenge. My soul remained intact. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. Just when I decided to do the honorable thing, I heard this. That gut-wrenching sound was so terrible, so wrong, that it almost killed me. No, it was not the sound of her climax that sent the killing shot through me. It hurt, but not as much as later. I love you, baby. Her quiet voice was barely audible, but her words were deafening. Those 4 words instantly consumed me, filling me with such agony that they almost crippled me. She spoke to me with the same words, in the same tone. They were spoken in a hoarse voice that trembled due to her climax, but they were full of love and affection. She loved him. Did she love him? Instantly, I felt overboard and drowning in a sea of pain, hopelessness, despair, and white-hot rage. I couldn't swim. I couldn't breathe. The water was too choppy. The waves were too strong. The more I fought it, the more my lungs burned and filled. Finally, I gave up. I didn't have the strength to resist. Fate has won. They had to die. I will end their world forever. But not like that. Not with this gun. I will not give them the peace that a silent death could provide. I wanted them to feel as much pain as I did. I wanted them to feel the same loss that I felt. If they die, they won't feel it. One of their last memories will be the sweet love they felt. It's just no good. Wanted something different. I wanted to tear them out of each other's hands, kicking and screaming. I wanted to smear everything that touched their love. I wanted to take everything they held dear and strangle them with it. I left them alone with their love. I'll give them a reprieve for tonight. Only for tonight. I hope they would like it. This will be my last gift to them. The pen is mightier than the sword. Edward Bulwer Lytton. I was going to kill them 1,000 times, using a weapon more powerful than my 9mm Beretta. I will make them wake up every morning and regret their existence with a simple device. Pens. Half an hour later, I walked into my empty apartment with a sinister smile on my face. The sadness and pain I felt was hidden by my insatiable desire to see them suffer. I wanted to see her face, distorted by such deep loss, so that it would match what I saw in the mirror when I thought about her. I sat down at the table and took out a pen and notepad. Then I started writing. The words spilled out of me like vomit. My pain burped and splashed across the paper. It took 5 drafts before I read what I wrote and was happy with it. Then I sealed their fate in an envelope, added a stamp, and walked to the nearest mailbox to drop off the letter. I could have just put it as outgoing mail in my mailbox, but I had to walk around and drop it to make sure I couldn't change my mind. As soon as I dropped the letter in the mailbox, I was left with a lonely feeling of rejection, as well as anger at the betrayal. As I trudged back to my apartment, my shoulders sagged under the weight of the world. Damn it! I hated the hell out of her. I hated her. I still loved her. My pride didn't want to admit it, but it was the truth. I will love her for some time to come. However, there was a small piece of hope left in me. I knew life would go one way or the other. Whatever happens to Rachel, days will turn into weeks, which will turn into months and years. One day, all of today's events will disappear into the ether of history. They will turn into the sad story of my past. Tomorrow's current events will eclipse today's. As I reached my doorstep, I chuckled to myself at one last thought. In about 3 days, I will change her life in such a way that she will never forget me. No matter how much time passes, she will never be able to dismiss me as a historical point in the history of her life. I'll be the idiot who changed her future. Letter, dear Robert Hamsley Sr. My name is Jonathan. You don't know me, so don't bother trying to remember my face. We met once about 3 years ago, but I doubt you even remember me. It was at a Christmas party that the company throws every year. You were so engrossed in your conversation with Rachel that you barely paid attention to me. The way you looked at her and danced with her gave the impression that there was no one there except you. No matter how many times she confessed her love for me, it didn't match the way she looked at you that evening. Then I realized it. I knew she was more in love with you than with me. That was the first time I knew you existed. She had never mentioned you in the office before. She didn't even wear a wedding ring. As soon as she stepped into that building, you no longer existed. I shouldn't have been at that party. She tried to come up with an excuse to keep me at home, but I insisted. I wanted to be with her that evening, so I ignored her flimsy arguments and came anyway. God, was this really the biggest surprise of my life? I had to throw her out of my head and run as fast as I could. But I couldn't. I refused to believe it, no matter what my head told me. Instead, I believed her lies when she told me that you meant nothing to her and that I was the only love in her life. I believed her because my heart wanted it that way. Although I know you don't know me. However, you know the woman I love. You know her well. See, you know her because you're married. We've been having an affair for 4 years now. I know what you're thinking. Yes, we're together for a little over a third of your marriage. Most likely, you are chalking it up to a mistake. Maybe this letter was intended for some other loser husband. Or maybe I'm confusing your Rachel with another woman who goes by the same name. That last shred of hope that you're desperately clinging to won't let you believe that your wife would ever do this to you. For now, I can prove this to you by describing the private parts of her body. You know, those parts that a man can't know unless he's seen her in the throes of passion. I really could do this, but I don't have to. I have much more accurate evidence. My son. All you have to do is check out Bobby Jr. I say that your son is not your son. He is my son. I am his biological father. He may have your last name, but he has my blood in him. Don't believe it? Well, it's good that we live in a world of opportunities to get to the truth. All it takes is a swab from the inside of his cheek. But I'll save you time. Attached to this letter is a copy of the DNA test your wife took a couple of years ago. She doesn't know that I have it. She destroyed the original. However, when she was sleeping in my bed after showing it to me, I made a copy. Maybe I subconsciously suspected that the three of us would end up at this point. Tonight I was at your house. I saw you two having sex in your bed. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to endure. I kept remembering how Rachel and I made love on this very bed. Every time you were out of town, I was there for her. You looked so happy. You were sure that she was yours and only yours. Do you want to hear something funny? Probably not, but I'll say it anyway. Just over a week ago, I had the same confidence. In the same bed. The same words she said to you. She said to me many times. You're probably wondering how I got into your house undetected and why I was there in the first place. Well, how? It's simple. I know where you keep your spare key. I've used it several times to get into your house without the neighbors noticing. On those warm nights, I would climb your stairs and enter your bedroom. Rachel was there in your bed, waiting for me. I managed to stay undetected because I know your living room so well that I can walk around blindfolded and not bump into anything. I managed to climb the stairs quietly because I know which steps squeak. Rachel was always adamant about not waking our son. Yes, he was home, sleeping in his room, so she always made me tiptoe around. Why was I there today? The answer to this question is a little more complicated. There's no point in beating around the bush, so I'll just say it. I was there in your house to kill you both. Do you want to know what stopped me? My son. I knew that killing you two would change his life forever. I couldn't do this to him. He doesn't deserve this. I wish I could tell you that I regret all of this, but I don't. You need to know what kind of woman you are married to. The love you share with her is not just yours. This woman is not only yours. Before she decided to end our relationship, she was trying to figure out how to leave you. We were going to live together. I don't know why she suddenly changed her mind and decided to stay with you. I think you win in this aspect. But did you really do it? Does this knowledge make her love any less special? Does it hurt to know that she can give her love to someone else so easily? Since it is no longer a rare item, does that make the love in question any less valuable? Does this upset you? I hope so. I hope the pain you feel makes you smarter than me. I hope you will do what I should have done when I realized that her sweet words of love were nothing but a lie. If you're worried about having to look over your shoulder, don't be. I will end this letter with a promise. You don't have to worry about me trying to finish what I started. I won't bother you ever again. You can send the police on me and arrest me for breaking and entering if you want. But I bet you won't. I bet you understand that your quarrel is not with me, just as I realized that mine is not with you. Wouldn't you rather think of me as the guy who opened your eyes? I will never bother you again because you are both in my past. I need to let her go and heal. I can survive the pain of losing her. In the end, I'll move on and she'll just be a bullet that I dodged. What I can't handle is the pain that comes with constantly hating her. She's not worth it, not anymore. If you want my advice, get rid of her. The loss you will feel by doing this will pale in comparison to what you will experience if you always have to wonder. Every day you will ask yourself, will she leave me today for another man? Believe me when I tell you that watching her walk out of your life is enough to make a man do the unthinkable. Take this advice, whatever the cost. Sincerely finished with her, Jonathan, 3 years later. I looked at my watch for the millionth time and stared at the pimply teenager who couldn't figure out how to make a simple sandwich. How long will it take? If I had known I would have to wait that long, I would have gone back there and done it myself. I was already in a bad mood. It's been 2.5 years since I was last here. There were many bad memories associated with him. My plan was to close this contract my job sent me to sign and get the hell out of here. If I'm lucky, I'll be able to do this without running into ghosts from my past. John? I'm never lucky. I heard my name spoken almost in a whisper as I stood in line waiting for my lunch order to be collected. A quiet, sad voice came from behind me. I didn't need to turn around to recognize the owner. I remembered it. Once upon a time, hearing her say my name would have made my heart flutter. But now, no longer. I turned to face the beautiful siren of my past. Rachel. My eyes met hers again, just like many times before. A strange feeling of déjà vu washed over me. This was where our first date was many years ago. It wasn't really a date. It was more like lunch with a colleague. At least that's what we told ourselves at the time. However, the undeniable physical attraction between us, as well as the growing sexual tension due to flirtatious banter, mixed with sexual innuendo, made our shared lunch anything but innocent. At that time, I knew nothing about her husband. For me, she was an accessible woman. But to be completely honest, I wouldn't care if I did. As soon as I looked into her eyes and heard her guttural laugh, I was lost. I succumbed to her charms, her song, and, in the end, met my fate. Yes, I felt nostalgic for the erotic memories Rachel and I had. But other memories followed. Disappointment, loneliness, insanity. Rachel flashed a small smile and waved as I turned to her. "I thought it was you," she said, giving me another one. "Hey, Rach," I said, unwittingly doing the same to her. An old habit. She was still a knockout. I couldn't help but appreciate it. "I didn't expect to run into you here." I was pleasantly surprised at how calm my inner state was. My voice was smooth and full of sincere warmth. I didn't have to pretend at all. There was a time when just hearing her name, even if it was addressed to another woman, would send me into a tailspin. But here I stand in front of the object of my death and feel completely under control. "The same. You disappeared when you transferred." Her eyes broke contact for a moment and looked down. Something like melancholy flashed across her face, but it was a quick flash. I nodded in agreement. "Yes, I had to leave. I needed a change of scenery, you know? I needed space." She nodded grimly at what was left unsaid. "Yes, I think we both needed it." An awkward silence followed. She looked like she was about to say something else, but I heard someone call me. I had to abruptly break away from the conversation to look at the waiter. Once I made eye contact with him, letting him know that the food was mine, I quickly returned my attention to Rachel. "Well, it's my turn. It was nice meeting you, Rach." She smiled at me with thin lips and exhaled too loudly. She didn't seem to be done with the conversation and was a little upset that we had been interrupted. But all she said was, "It was nice meeting you too, John." With these words, I turned away from her to go get food. I was about to leave, but as I passed Rachel, she lightly grabbed my arm to stop me. "Hey, John, are you in a hurry? I was hoping that maybe we could, talk. There was a lot left unsaid between us." I wanted to refuse her. Memory lane isn't exactly a walk in the park, but deep down I knew she was right. The situation really needed to be clarified a little. "Certainly. I don't have to go back right now. I'll take a table over there and wait for you," I said, pointing to an empty table in the corner of the restaurant. She tilted her head back and glanced over her shoulder to see where I was pointing. Her hair fanned out from the rapid movement of her head. If cameras had been trained on her, this moment could have been slowed down and turned into an ad for $1 million shampoo. "Okay, I'll take my order and join you," she said with a smile. I sat down at the table and began laying out the contents of my lunch. I was a little annoyed because I had a bag of food instead of a tray, but using my bag as a plate to change food wasn't too bad. About 5 minutes later, Rachel sat in the chair opposite me. At first, we both ate in silence. It was her party, so I assumed she would start over. Although I had some burning questions that had been plaguing me for the past few years, I couldn't find the words to ask them. I hoped she would start talking and lead me to what I needed to know. Apparently, she had the same hope. So we both sat in awkward, tense silence. Chewing. Neither of us tried to look each other in the eyes. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that she was looking at the far wall. I did the same. "Why did you do this to me, John? Why did you ruin my life?" I looked at her and saw that her eyes were full of tears. "A gun or a letter?" "Both. Mostly writing. I actually understand guns, believe it or not." "But you don't understand the letter? Really?" She sniffed and wiped her eyes. "No, I don't know. Not really. I can understand your desire to kill me, although I will never believe that you could do it. You're too good a guy. But I would never have expected you to go out of your way and intentionally hurt me like this. With this letter, you decided to ruin my life. The way it was written, it was like you deliberately chose the wording that would cause the most damage. I thought you were different. I couldn't understand how I felt hearing her say that. This irritated me the most. She broke my heart as easily as a child breaks fine chine, and now she's judging me for what I did in retaliation, without even judging me for trying to kill her. She understood this. She was offended that I told the truth about her. Despite my righteous indignation, there was something else I felt too. Believe it or not, at the same time I felt guilty. Not for what I did to her, but for why I did it. After dealing with the pain, I was able to look back on my time with Rachel. All the memories I had with her, all the declarations of love, they were not mine. They belonged to him. I felt bad because I didn't do it because it was the right thing to do. I wasn't honest. I did it as a passive-aggressive act of revenge for a broken heart. She was right. I was completely different. I was always taught to do the right thing. That's not what my father told me. But all the time I spent with her after I found out she was married, I was someone I didn't recognize. But I'll be damned if she judges me. Did you think I was different in some way? Are you serious? No. You thought I'd just disappear and keep your dirty little secret. I wasn't the one who cheated on your husband, Rachel. It's all you. I didn't know him. I didn't love him. You loved him. You swore with him, and then broke those vows with me. Now you want to blame your failed marriage on me because I told him what you did to him? I think this is nonsense. If you want to blame someone for the fact that your marriage is falling apart, look in the mirror. Her head snapped towards me, our eyes finally meeting. I saw small embers of angry fire behind them, but they quickly went out. She couldn't argue with the truth. She knew I was right. After a moment, her eyes broke contact again, this time looking down at her food. "You're right," she agreed reluctantly. Another awkward silence threatened to engulf us, so I decided it was my turn to ask what had been secretly nagging me, even after all this time. "Why didn't you choose me? If your marriage was as bad and unloving as you claimed, why did you stay in it? After all the times you told me you loved me and all the plans we made, you still stayed with him. Why?" She chewed the roast so as not to answer right away. I waited for her to speak again. Now it was her turn to continue. I wasn't going to help her out by speaking first. "I really loved you, John. This is true. I wanted to leave him and run away with you. When I was with you, it seemed like the whole world stopped moving. Nothing else mattered. When I was far from you, I dreamed of seeing you again." "But," I asked when she paused for a moment longer than she should have. I was afraid that she would run out of momentum. "But I loved him too." "Sorry. And this is also true. I know I told you the marriage was in trouble. For some time, this was the case." Her gaze became distant before she continued. "We were both very young when we met. In fact, I just turned 20 a few months ago. It was all about sex back then. We couldn't keep our hands off each other. After just 6 months of dating, we got married. We didn't even have a real wedding. It didn't matter at the time. The only thing we cared about was a vow of eternal love. The first few years were wonderful. We had sex at every opportunity in any place that was even slightly covered. We couldn't go more than a few hours without calling each other when we were separated. We even took a shower together every morning before going to work. Then tension arose between us. Work began to take up more and more of our time. Bills had to be paid. We had less time for each other because we were constantly working. When he was promoted, we thought it was the answer to our prayers. But it wasn't like that. In fact, it widened the gap between us. He was gone more times because he had more responsibility. On top of that, I still had to work because even though he was paid more, it wasn't enough. It seemed that when I was at home, he was not there, and vice versa. Then, when we were home together, all we wanted to do was sleep and relax. And that's where you met me, I interrupted, putting this part together. She nodded. Yes, when I met you, I had already forgotten what it was like to be desired and loved. I mean, men always looked at me, but there was something wrong with you. You made me feel it just like he did when we first met. It opened up a world that I had closed inside myself. Flirting, sexual jokes, it all made me feel desired. When I tried to rekindle the sex life between Rob and me, he got upset, so I stopped trying. That is, with him. She looked at me and caught my eye. I nodded in agreement to her statement. I mean, I guess I just had to be a lover at work. Right? This time she nodded. At first, yes. Actually, you were supposed to be disposable. And what has changed? She looked at me with a shy smile and said, You did it so well that I couldn't stop. I had to laugh. Thanks for the ego support. This is not for the sake of boosting the ego. I was just telling you why I continued with you. Okay, so, you wanted a romantic night's work, but I laid you down so well in the bedroom that you couldn't stop. No ego boost here. Please don't be shy, carry on, I said with a playful grin on my face as I sipped my drink. Anyway, she said, giving me a playful look and throwing a napkin at me. I continued to date you. The more I saw you, the closer you became. I gradually lost love for my husband. This lively banter between us was reminiscent of a time long past. But this conversation was not meant to rekindle those feelings. He was supposed to provide the answers we needed. Why didn't you just divorce him? I asked, bringing us back. With this question, the playfulness disappeared, and the conversation became serious again. Her face took on a gloomy expression. Honestly, I don't know. I definitely planned this. I even talked to divorce lawyers. I kept telling myself that I would do it eventually. All I needed was the right time. But you never did, although you always told me that you would do it. I paused and placed my elbows on the table, placing my palms together to form a triangle. Then I rested my chin on my fists. With an exhale, I said, Do you want to know what I think? I think there was never a right time because you were never going to do it, am I right? She wiped a tear from her eye and nodded. Yes, I pursed my lips, frowning, and suppressed the half-hearted response that tried to escape. I raised my head, took a deep breath, and carefully chose the following words. You're going to have to help me, Rach, because I think you're a heartless bitch. Okay. Perhaps I didn't choose my words carefully enough, and yet my answer was honest. She looked at me with eyes full of pain and surprise. I jumped up and continued, You want me to believe that you are not the monster I think you are? But the facts paint a different picture. You were married, and you made me believe that you were single. When I found out you were married, you led me to believe that the marriage was in danger, even though you had just admitted that you had no real intention of ending it. I was originally supposed to be half a fuck buddy, but you went on dates with me, talked about a future with me, and even had a fucking baby with me. For God's sake, we even looked for a house together. You even chose one that was exactly what you dreamed of when you were a child. But after all this, you sit here and say that it was just your fantasy. I was a distraction to keep you entertained while you waited for your marriage to get back on track. It sounds so evil when you say it like that, she said, still stung by my attack on her. I let out a cynical laugh. That's how it is, isn't it? You should have told me that you're just playing a game to spice up your life. Maybe then I wouldn't involve my heart in this. She took a minute to collect her thoughts before answering. I wasn't trying to play with you, John. Our relationship developed faster than I expected, and I began to get confused. But you can't honestly sit there and play the unsuspecting victim. Yes, I didn't tell you I was married, but you found out about it at that Christmas party. Have you left? No. You still stayed. You've been in a relationship with a married woman for many years. You didn't care about my husband. What you really wanted was for me to leave him and take you in his place. Your sanctimonious need for truth and justice only manifested itself after I chose not you. Maybe I cheated, but you know what? And you too. At least I have the conscience to admit it after all these years. So please calm down your arrogance and stop jugging me as if you were unintentionally duped. We were silent for a while, as if we needed a break. I didn't want to admit it, but there was a lot of truth in what she said. I really had a hand in all of this. Of course, she still has the lion's share, but I also contributed significantly to the crap that splattered after it hit the fan. The only real victim in this whole affair was Rob. Still, she was crazy if she felt that I was as guilty as she was. Be that as it may, you still lied to me. Not only about the fact that you are married, but also about how little your marriage meant to you. You kept telling me that you were both headed for disaster. But I saw the way he looked at you that evening, the way you both looked at each other. There was real love there. You made me believe that it didn't happen, because you knew that, if you told me the truth, I wouldn't fall in love with you. So that's what you're thinking about? Do you think I came up with this whole plan to make you fall in love with me so I could dump you at the last minute? Come on, John. She shifted in her chair and crossed her arms. We sat in silence, listening to my watch, counting down the seconds. Around us, people were talking happily and eating, as if we did not exist. Funny how life works. No matter how much your world suffers, everything else moves without any hesitation. Listen, John. She began again, breaking the silence. During the time when you were supposed to be temporary, I didn't tell you about Rob, because I felt like it didn't matter. The plan was to date together, relieve some stress, and then go our separate ways with fond memories. In the back of my mind, I always thought that my marriage would eventually return to normal. I decided we were in a win-win situation. I get a mental break from a long-term marriage, and you get free, no-strings-attached sex. What I didn't expect was for you to be so funny and sweet. I didn't expect us to have sex like we did. The way you touched me, kissed me, loved me, it was wonderful. You made me feel beautiful. I should have stopped after that time. You were a problem for me, but I didn't. After a while, I felt that I was increasingly drawn to you. When this happened, it became harder for me to tell you. And then, the Christmas party happened. Yes, Christmas party, I said sadly, as memories of that evening came flooding back to me. Finding out that the woman I was falling in love with was actually married to someone else was a gut punch to no end. She shrugged. You say Rob and I were so in love that night. This is how we looked to everyone. Everyone thought we had the perfect marriage. We were good at this, pretending that everything was fine. But you chose him in the end, so it couldn't all be fake. Before speaking, she smiled a kind of nostalgic smile. Something happened between us. I can't say exactly when or what it was, but something clicked. Maybe it was his part, or maybe I was just giving off a different vibe. I don't know. All I know is that we just started clicking again. It seemed that we had been in this thick fog for so long that we had forgotten about the sunlight. Then suddenly everything became clear and we finally saw each other. I snorted and shook my head. Then he smiled bitterly and said, "At the same time, you had that annoying affair on the side that you had to get rid of." She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Maybe it was like that at first, but you have become much more. You can be angry with me for a lot of things. Lord knows you have options to choose from, but I can't let you think that I made the decision to let you go easily. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I snatched her hand away. Who cares how hard it was for her to break my heart? It won't restore it. In fact, it seemed quite as selfish. Was she now a victim? What about our son? I asked, changing the subject. I was tired of hearing how much she didn't want to hurt me. It was time to move on to another topic that was tormenting me. Bobby? And what happened to him? Does he know about me? Her eyes were full of tears again. No. He is only 6 years old. Too young to understand this. Luckily, he was young enough that he didn't fully understand what was going on between his father and me. All he knows is that Dad doesn't live with us anymore, but he still spends a lot of time with him. He gets double presents on Christmas and birthdays. and his father comes and takes him out for ice cream. If I tell him about you, it will be many years later." She wiped her eyes, then remembered something. She looked at me with narrowed eyes. "Just curious, I guess. You know, I always wanted a son, I told you. Now I have him, but I don't have the opportunity to be involved in any part of his life. It's just hard for me, that's all." She continued to look at me with suspicion. "You're not going to start a scandal over Bobby, are you?" "If so, then don't," she said in a voice that was both a warning and a threat. "Look, Rach, I'm not trying to ruin everything for you, not really, but you have to understand what I'm going through right now. I have a son who knows nothing about me. You forget that I wanted to take you and arrange your life. When you told me you were pregnant and that the baby was probably mine, I dreamed of a future with you and Bobby. You snatched this dream from me." She stared at me in disbelief, and then her face became angry. "What are you going through? I need to understand what you're going through. You were gone for 3 years, and you didn't even pick up the phone to see if Bobby was okay. I haven't seen a single check for alimony from you, and you haven't even tried to start doing it. So, don't you dare sit here and try to claim it as if you've been scammed. The reason I didn't do it was because I was your dark little secret for 4 years. I couldn't be there for my son, because if I was there, you'd have to tell your husband who his real father is. Okay, I understand. How do you justify the last 3 years?" She challenged me. "After you blew up my life and told Rob everything, why didn't you try to help your son?" "I needed to get away from you. If I had stayed, I would have done something crazy. I left for our safety." She leaned back in her chair and glared at me. "So you left your son, the son you always wanted, because you couldn't control yourself around your mother? Don't you dare turn this against me. You have broken my heart." She leaned forward and gave me a challenging look. "I have nothing against you, John, but I want to say one thing. Yes, I broke your heart. I'm a terrible person to be in a serious relationship with. But you know who else got their heart broken? Roberts. In fact, I broke it even worse, but you know what? He stayed nearby for Bobby. He may not have wanted to be married to me anymore, but he loved his son enough to find a way to stay in his life. He is Bobby's father and has been for 6 years. This is what is written on the birth certificate. He had been looking after him for the last 3 years, even though he knew that Bobby was not his biologically. He takes Bobby away from the babysitter when I can't and spends every weekend with him at his house. He even makes sure I have all of Bobby's favorite foods in the house when I don't have the money for it. Would you do this? My only answer was silence. However, it didn't matter. She didn't expect anything deep in response. As she continued, "Robert has earned the right to be Bobby's father, not you. I'm not going to spoil it for any of them. I've already done enough. So, I'm sorry you feel like you pulled the short match, but it is what it is. I care about what's best for Bobby, and you don't." As much as I wanted to deny it, she was 100% right. I felt a pang of jealousy at the thought that her ex-husband was a better father than me, but I could not dispute the facts. There was no room in my life for a child, at least for the fact that he was born in such conditions. I wasn't Bobby's best option because, in the end, I couldn't be there for him as the person who raised him. I was not constantly present in his life. I would arrange life in another city. I really wanted to have children, but I wanted everything. I wanted my wife to go with the children. Selfish? Maybe. But it's not as selfish as it would be to destroy what Bobby had with Robert Sr. just because I had some technical beef with his origins. Next to him was his father, who honorably took responsibility for him. He chose Bobby, despite all the troubles that surrounded him. "You're right," I said, nodding in agreement. She visibly relaxed and took a deep breath, as if she had been holding her breath for a minute. "I just have one last question, Rach. If you had to do it all over again, would you do it differently? Would you choose me?" She thought for a minute, and then looked at me with a strange look. I couldn't tell what it was, but it seemed like she was trying to figure out the best way to say what she wanted. "Yes, I would do things differently, but not in the way you think." She took a break and looked at me again with the same look. This time I figured out its meaning. She tried not to hurt my feelings. If I had to do it again, I wouldn't contact you at all. I fell in love with you, and it stopped me from working on my marriage. No matter how much I loved you, I always loved him more. I didn't realize it until it was too late, because I wasn't honest with you or with myself. I had the love of two great men, and I lost them both, because I didn't listen to my heart from the beginning. Even though I had already gotten over the pain of the past, it still hurt me to hear that our time together was a mistake in her mind. I agreed with her, but it still felt like another refusal. However, this was exactly what I needed to hear. I also believe that this is what she wanted to tell me. She had to say those words out loud to give them life. They must have been on her mind ever since her husband received the letter. Saying them out loud and hearing them spoken gave us a sense of accomplishment. At this chapter, we both could close the book of our lives and put it away forever. Soon after this, our lunch ended. There was nothing more to say. Leaving the restaurant, we said goodbye. We even hugged one last time, saying goodbye. Then she turned left, and I turned right. Every step we took us further and further away from each other as we left each other's lives for the last time. Neither of us turned to look at the other's retreating figure. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.